You know that specific kind of heartbreak that is entirely unique to PC builders?
Oh, I think I know exactly where you're going with this.
Right. It's like 2 a.m. You finally convinced yourself that your computer desperately needs an upgrade.
Naturally.
You've done the research, you've picked out the parts, you navigate to the online store, you find that sweet 32 gig DDR5 RAM kit you bookmarked just last month.
And you completely freeze.
Yeah, because the price tag doesn't look anything like it did a month ago.
Not even close.
I actually refreshed the page thinking it was a glitch. I mean, it had nearly doubled, but it wasn't a glitch. And it's not just me. We are seeing reports everywhere about this phenomenon. People are calling it hardware inflation or the memory crisis of 2026.
Yeah, it is absolutely real. If you are a builder or even just someone trying to buy a high-end laptop right now, you are definitely feeling that sting. The market has shifted so aggressively in such a short amount of time.
So naturally, the burning question we are starting with today is simply why? Why are computer parts suddenly holding my wallet hostage again? Is it just corporate greed, or is something bigger happening?
It's a great question to start with. And the answer is fascinating because it's not just about a broken supply chain like we've seen before. It is a deliberate, massive shift in the global economy.
Okay, so here is our mission for this deep dive. We're going to get to the bottom of this. We have a great stack of research today. We're looking at financial reports from Sandisk, technical white papers on data center architecture, and some really wild consumer investigative
A
reports.
solid stack.
And we are going to use all of that to trace this price hike back to its source. Specifically, we're going to dive into the connection between SanDisk and artificial intelligence. We'll look at how data centers are demanding so much memory that it's reshaping the market, and then we'll break down what this means for SanDisk's future and their massive stock price surge.
That is the perfect way to frame it. Because we really need to connect the dots from that sticker shock in your shopping cart directly to this newly independent company and a fundamental change in how AI is physically built.
We're talking about a $1 trillion shift here. So let's start with the engine. What is actually driving this? Because usually when prices go up, it's just a basic supply issue. But this feels completely different.
It is different. To understand the price tag, you have to look at the entity that is hungrier than any human consumer right now.
AI.
Exactly. Artificial intelligence. But here's the thing. It's not just about the chips that do the thinking anymore.
You mean the GPUs, like the NVIDIA stuff everyone is always talking about?
Right. The GPUs are important, obviously, but the bottleneck has shifted
Okay, shifted to where?
to memory. Our sources highlight two major structural shifts causing this hardware inflation. First, there is an insatiable, almost desperate hunger for something called HBM.
High bandwidth memory.
Yes. Think of it like this. If a standard processor is drinking from a garden hose, an AI processor needs a literal fire hose. HBM is that fire hose. And right now, the big tech giants, your Googles, your Microsofts, OpenAIs, they are hoarding this stuff,
Guarding it.
buying up every scrap of it before it even leaves the factory floor.
Okay, so the big guys are sucking all the oxygen out of the room. But, and correct me if I'm wrong here, I'm not trying to buy HBM for my gaming rig. I just want standard DDR5. Why am I paying more if I'm just buying the cheap stuff?
Because manufacturing is a zero-sum game. You have a factory. You have a limited number of clean rooms and machines. To make that high-end, high-margin HBM for the tech giants, manufacturers are retooling.
Oh, I see.
They are physically taking production lines offline that used to make the standard consumer stuff,
Yeah.
and they're switching them over to the AI stuff.
So the supply of my standard RAM goes down because the factories are too busy building brains for bots.
Exactly. And it gets even more technical, which creates a second bottleneck. There's a transition happening right now to a new standard called shear dim.
CD. I saw that in the notes. It sounds like a made-up sci-fi term.
Oh, yeah.
Does that actually matter to the average person buying a computer?
It matters because it's disrupting the supply chain even further. It stands for Clocked Unbuffered Dual Inline Memory Module.
Wow, that is a mouthful.
It really is. But basically, it adds a clock driver directly onto the memory stick itself. It manages speed and stability a lot better. But it's a physical change in how the hardware is built.
So they can't just use the old assembly lines.
Right. Factories aren't just cranking out the old stuff. They have to stop, retool, and switch to this new CUDM architecture.
Which creates a massive gap in supply.
You combine that factory downtime with the AI hoarding, and you get the perfect storm that hit your wallet last night. Low supply plus insane demand equals much higher prices.
Okay, so the robots are literally eating my RAM. But I really want to talk about the scale of this. Because when companies say demand is high, usually they mean, sales are up 10%. But looking at this Sandisk white paper on AI architecture, the numbers are frankly hard to comprehend.
They are staggering. The white paper projects that IT spending specifically for AI infrastructure is going to jump from about $315 billion in 2024
To what?
to $1.26 trillion by 2029.
From billions to trillions in just 5 years.
It is an absolute gold rush. And the key insight from that white paper, the thing that really caught my eye, was this phrase, data fuels AI.
Data fuels AI.
We so often focus on the computing power. But the white paper argues that the bottleneck is actually storage speed. If you can't feed data to the AI fast enough, the AI just sits idle.
And I imagine an idle AI running on hardware that costs millions of dollars is a very, very expensive paperweight.
Extremely. They talk about latency, the delay in moving data. For training these massive large language models, they need what they call ultra real-time transfer. We are talking less than 40 milliseconds.
40 milliseconds. Just to put that in perspective for you listening, a human blink is roughly 100 to 150 milliseconds. So we are talking about speeds significantly faster than the blink of an eye.
Exactly. And this is why those old spinning hard drives, the ones that were and click in your older desktop, they're completely useless for this specific task.
They're ancient history.
Ancient history. You need flash storage. You need SSDs. And that brings us to a specific piece of hardware Sandisk released, which really illustrates this whole shift, the Sandisk DC SN8SIS1.
Catchy name.
Yeah.
The marketing department must have been on vacation for that one.
Yeah, engineers are terrible at naming things. But look at the specs on this drive. It's an enterprise-class SSD using PCIe Gen 5 speeds, which is the absolute cutting edge right now.
And what's the capacity on a single drive?
It packs up to 7.68 terabytes of storage into a tiny form factor.
Nearly 8 terabytes on one drive. I remember when a 1 terabyte hard drive felt like it could hold the entire Library of Congress.
I know, right?
Yeah.
And this drive is optimized specifically for compute-intensive AI applications. This hardware is the physical infrastructure of the boom. It represents exactly why Sandisk is pivoting so hard. They aren't just selling SD cards for your camera anymore.
They are building the foundation for the next generation of computing, which is the perfect transition to the business side of things. Because if you're listening to this and you hold tech stocks, your ears should be perking up right about now. Sandisk looks a little different these days, doesn't it?
Very different. And this is crucial context for the market. As of February 21, 2025, Sandisk is a standalone public company again. They separated from Western Digital.
They spun off, so they're completely independent.
Right. And usually when a company spins off, there's a period of adjustment, a little turbulence. But looking at their Q2 2026 financial results, which we have right here, how is life on the outside treating them?
It looks like they are having the time of their lives, honestly. For the quarter ending in January 2026, they reported revenue of $3.03 billion. That is up 31% from just the previous quarter.
A 31% jump in 3 months is massive for a hardware manufacturing company. That is usually software-level growth.
But here's the statistic that really proves our point about the AI connection. Their data center revenue, which is selling things like that high-end SN861 drive we just talked about, was up 64% sequentially.
64%. That is the smoking gun right there. The growth isn't coming from people buying USB drives at the electronics store. The growth is coming from the cloud. This proves that their AI bet is absolutely paying off.
And this brings us back to the stock price and the valuation. Because if I'm an investor, I'm looking at that 64% growth and I'm seeing massive dollar signs.
Absolutely. In the earnings report, Sandisk's CEO, David Goshler, said something that explains everything about the current market. He said, customers are prioritizing supply over price.
Oof, that is a magic phrase for any business. Translation, we need it so bad we don't care what you charge us.
Precisely. It is a massive seller's market. We have a report from Nomura Securities, which we found via a Turkish tech news source, Aslı Kamisap, that analyzes this specific strategy. They claim Sandisk plans to double the price of their enterprise 3D NAND chips in the first quarter of 2026.
Double the price. Just because they can.
Because the demand is there
Yeah.
and the supply is tight. When you are the one holding the keys to the AI castle, you can charge whatever admission you want. And Wall Street loves this. Sandisk beat earnings expectations significantly. They reported $6.20 earnings per share versus the expected $3.33.
Yeah. They didn't just beat it, they nearly doubled the expectation.
Exactly. So the market is pricing in this dominance. Investors see Sandisk not as a legacy storage company, but as a critical AI infrastructure company.
So if you are a shareholder, you are popping champagne right now.
Right.
But if you are a consumer, well, let's pivot back to so what's for the little guy?
Yeah.
Because hearing that Sandisk is making a killing is great for them, but I'm still stuck with an overpriced shopping cart at 2 a.m.
Right. If you were a consumer, you were essentially paying the bill for Sandisk's success.
Yeah. And the ripple effect is so real. When enterprise demand spikes, it sucks up all the manufacturing capacity. That leaves less capacity for consumer products, which drives up our prices. But it also creates a darker side effect that we found in the research.
Oh, the scammers.
The scammers come out of the woodwork.
They absolutely do. When people are desperate for a deal, when the real stuff is just too expensive, they stop looking as closely at the seller. We found a fascinating and honestly kind of terrifying investigation on Reddit about counterfeit storage.
Oh, I saw this one, the fake SD cards. This is wild. Walk us through how the scam actually works technically. Because it's not just an empty plastic shell, right?
No, it's actually quite sophisticated. So you go online, maybe Amazon or the third-party marketplace, and you see a 1 terabyte micro SD card for a price that seems just a little too good to be true, maybe $15 or $20.
Which should immediately be the first red flag. A 1 terabyte card should cost way more than that.
Huge red flag.
Yeah.
But you buy it, you plug it in, and your computer pops up and says, oh, look, 999 gigabytes available.
So it looks real. The computer genuinely thinks it's real.
It looks real because the controller inside the card, the tiny brain that talks to your PC, has been hacked. The scammers reprogram the firmware to actively lie to your operating system. The actual physical storage on the chip is maybe 32 gigabytes.
So what happens when you actually try to fill it up?
That's the real tragedy. You start transferring your photos or your game files.
Yeah.
The first 32 gigs write perfectly fine. But then it starts overwriting the beginning of the drive. It's like a continuous loop. You think your data is safe, but the card is just silently deleting your old files to make room for the new ones.
It's basically data roulette when you go to open those files later.
Corrupted, gone forever. And the Reddit thread listed some of these brand names to watch out for. They have these hilarious, completely randomly generated names.
Oh, I love these. Generic.
Yes, the 2 C's at the end, just to be extra safe.
Brewski.
Then hello.
Brewski sounds like a guy you'd meet at a frat party who promises he can get you a huge discount. Trust me, Brewski, it's totally a terabyte.
Yeah, don't trust Broski. And the advice from the community is very clear. If you see a brand name you can't pronounce, or if the price is impossibly low, run away. Stick to the reputable retailers. And don't just trust a random marketplace seller, because Amazon sometimes commingles inventory.
Right, meaning the fake stuff gets mixed into the same bin with the real stuff in the warehouse?
Exactly.
That is scary stuff.
Yeah.
So, okay, let's say we avoid Brewski. We buy the real stuff, like that Sandisk hardware. Even then, there are physical trade-offs, aren't there? We found a review from a tech YouTuber, Alp Gersoy, who did a head-to-head comparison between the consumer version of that Sandisk hardware, the Sandisk Extreme Portable SSD, and a Samsung T7.
This is a really interesting comparison because it highlights the actual physics of speed. We always want things to be faster, faster, faster.
Yeah.
But speed generates heat.
Right, so the Sandisk was faster in his test.
It was. He transferred a massive video file, about 142 gigabytes.
Sure.
The Sandisk did it in 5 minutes and 34 seconds. The Samsung took 7 minutes and 28 seconds. So if time is money, Sandisk definitely wins.
There's always a but.
But the heat. The Sandisk drive got significantly hotter during that transfer. It reached about 43 to 45 degrees Celsius. The Samsung stayed much cooler at around 34 degrees.
45 degrees? I mean, that's getting to the point where it's actually uncomfortable to hold, like a hot cup of coffee.
It gets very warm. And this isn't just a minor annoyance for a consumer. It connects directly back to that Sandisk white paper we discussed earlier. Just like your portable drive gets hot when it's working hard, these massive AI data centers are facing an absolute heat crisis.
Because heat is just waste energy.
Exactly. The white paper mentions that power consumption for AI data centers is growing at 19.5% per year. Power is literally becoming the new capacity. It's no longer just about how many terabytes of storage you have. It's about how much power you can afford to burn and how much heat you can dissipate before the entire system throttles itself.
So my hot portable drive is basically a microcosm of the global data center problem.
A tiny pocket-sized version of the global energy crisis, yes.
That is strangely poetic. But speaking of energy and costs, this brings us to the future. Because one of the most interesting arguments in that white paper was about the death of the hard drive.
The spinning rest?
Yeah. I mean, they are still cheaper to buy, right? If I want 20 terabytes to back up my movies at home, a traditional hard drive is way cheaper up front than an SSD.
Up front, yes. The acquisition cost is definitely lower. But Sandisk makes an argument about TCO, total cost of ownership.
Okay, let's unpack TCO for a second. Is this just corporate sales talk?
Not entirely. Think about it this way. An SSD is faster, obviously, but it is also much more power efficient per operation. It has zero moving parts. If you are a massive data center running thousands of drives, 247, and electricity prices are constantly rising, the cost to run the hard drives eventually overtakes the cost to buy the SSDs.
It's like buying a cheap car that gets terrible gas mileage. Eventually, the gas costs more than the car itself.
Exactly. So the all-flash data center, where there are no spinning disks at all, is actually becoming the cheaper option in the long run.
That is the argument. And it makes perfect sense why Sandisk is doubling down on this. They are betting that the economics of power will completely kill the hard drive.
And to make sure they can build enough of these flash drives to kill the hard drive, they've made some massive strategic moves, haven't they?
They have. They just renewed their joint venture with Kioxia in Japan.
Kioxia.
Yeah, they are a massive Japanese memory manufacturer. Sandisk and Kioxia have a partnership to share manufacturing capacity, and they just extended it for another 9 years.
That is a very long commitment in the tech world. 9 years is a lifetime.
It is a decade-long marriage. It tells us that Sandisk knows demand is going to be high for a very long time, and they need to secure the actual physical factories to meet it. They are locking in their supply chain to feed that AI beast.
So let's bring this all back home. We started with sticker shock in the shopping cart.
We did.
And what we found is that your inability to buy cheap RAM is basically collateral damage in a global war for artificial intelligence.
That is the harsh reality. The AI boom acts like a massive vacuum cleaner for high-end memory. Sandisk, now independent and nimble, is pivoting hard to feed that vacuum, and the result for them: massive stock gains, huge revenue jumps in the data center division, and the leverage to essentially double prices for enterprise customers.
And the fallout for us.
For the consumer, it means we're in a really tough spot. Upgrades are going to be expensive. You have to be hyper vigilant against scams like generic and broski. And the hardware we do buy is getting faster, yes, but also hotter and far more power hungry.
And, we also had that tip from one of the consumer articles. If you can't afford the RAM right now, maybe invest in the base Trio instead.
Right. That was really good advice. If RAM prices are prohibitive today, spend your current budget on a good case, a solid power supply, and high-quality cooling. Future-proof the foundation of your PC, so when prices eventually drop,
Hopefully.
yeah, when they drop, you are totally ready to slot that memory in.
It's a wait-and-see strategy. I like it.
It's the smart play right now. But before we sign off, I want to leave you listening with something to think about. We've talked a lot about prices going up, but where does this actually end?
What keeps me up at night regarding all of this is the idea of digital land. Storage is essentially real estate for the digital world. We are moving into an era where that digital land is becoming as expensive as actual physical real estate.
How so? Like, practically speaking.
Well, if data centers continue to consume projected amounts of power, potentially 12% of total U.S. power by 2028, and if the cost of storage keeps rising just to meet AI's needs, are we heading for a world where personal local storage becomes a luxury item?
You mean owning your own data physically, actually holding the drive in your hand, becomes something only the wealthy can afford?
Exactly. Will the rising costs force everyone else entirely into the cloud where you own nothing and you just rent everything? It forces us to ask a really uncomfortable question. Who really owns your digital life if you can't afford the warehouse to store it in?
That is a genuinely terrifying thought. I'm going to go hug my external hard drive now.
You might want to back it up first.
Good point. Thanks for diving deep with us today. Keep learning, watch those prices closely, and please check your SD cards before you use them.
And stay cool.